Right, Tony. So we talked in part one. We talked about rubbing shoulders with racing royalty, not rubbing shoulders, being good friends with racing royalty.
Yeah,
Henry Cecil. You rub shoulders with proper royalty, which we'll talk about in a bit. That's
yeah.
not bad for a young lad from Sunderland.
Yeah, well, my father was obviously very proud. He was a miner from a village called New Silsworth. So when we used to go back to, I think some of the lads in the club thought that I was just a bullshitter, that I was making these stories up, that somebody from New Silsworth in Sunderland was meeting Henry Cecil, was meeting Sir Michael Stoute and Alex Stewart and God knows who, Luca Kumani. But obviously, that when they picked their Sport and Life up, there was my name in there, and it was true. I mean, Stoute, he didn't really have a great love of the press, so he was always a bit tricky to, you'd wait for your moment to ask him a question, and he was always too busy, and it's like that was to me was bizarre because he was from Barbados, and some of his great friends just happened to be friends of mine as well from my trips to the Caribbean, and because I could only take holidays in the sort of in the January February time, when it was quiet, and we had the same set of friends out in Barbados who loved me and obviously loved Stouty, but he didn't really. When I actually lost my job, he couldn't have been. He actually wrote a letter to the Race and Post campaigning for me not to be sacked, so he was supportive, but. You'd go on the gallops and he would be doing the best doing, you want to ask a question. So, you think, well, the office want this story. So I thought, how am I going to get the bugger? And I thought, we didn't normally go out much on a Monday because that was a very quiet day. So one Monday, I go up to the Albahatri gallop, thinking I'll catch the bugger. And there was the late lovely Coral Pritchard Gordon and Lady Warren, and I was like blinking. I just sort of like, look, this, and I can see Stouty. I know what I'm going to ask him. Boom, I'm going in there. Anyway, they're going, not now, Tony, not now, Tony. And I'm going, what do you mean not? It was never a good time to speak to this bugger. Anyway, I see this little old lady just to my right there in a mac, in a little headscarf and that. And I thought, oh God, it's the Queen. So, this actually wasn't a good time to go to see it, but I did, when I was covering, I used to cover the Royal Ascot meeting, for the Race and Post and for the Sport and Life. I had a lot of good assignments because I was hopefully one of the top journalists on the paper, and Queen had a 2-year-old running in the Chesham Stakes, and I must have been about 3 foot away from her, maybe a little bit more. And I thought, this is my opportunity to speak to her. I think I overstepped royal protocol, but you could see she had a lovely lady, had such a beam and smile on her face, and I thought, she's happy. This is a good time to ask her a question. And I sort of just something just glib, sort of like, how does that feel, Your Majesty? And she says, oh, I'm absolutely delighted. Wasn't it wonderful? And I just thought, and I got a little bit more of a quote if someone happens to look back to say, and I thought, I was the only one who got a quote off the Queen. I thought, the red dot might have been on my head from the snipers on the roof, but, what the hell? I'm a journalist, I got my story. So it was brilliant, it was brilliant.
You going back to your early days.
Yeah.
So you were born in Sunderland,
Yeah.
but you went to university at York. So
Yeah.
I mean, you obviously did well academically because
Yeah.
back in those days it wasn't that easy for.
Well, there was
working
probably
people.
from our school. We went to Ryde Grammar School. Our fame to claim was Richie Pitt playing in the 1973 Cup final, and we had John Strand, who was an actor. But there's probably half a dozen or maybe slightly more that actually went on to university, and I was due to my father pushing me, to be honest. But we'd go on it was my love of racing that made me go to York. We'd go down to the Ebor, and I thought, if I'm going to university, I'm going to York, and that it was a vehicle to get into racing, because as soon as I got there, we had the old the Freshers' Week. and all the societies. And the first one I saw was University Turf Club. I thought, bang, you're in that. So 2 days after, they gave us tickets to go to the October meeting, and that was it. And then we did every track in Yorkshire, and so they're all not in quite close proximity, and we would do Haydock in Aintree, because they weren't far away, But that was the start. I met some friends who have been friends for life. Dominic Burke, who is the boss of Jardine, Lloyd Thompson, chairman at Newbury. He's got a horse with no name, or a mare called a horse with no name. She was second in the mare novices race at Cheltenham last year, and I went to that. He lived in Liverpool, so we'd get invited across for the national and everything, and do all that sort of stuff,
So you already had a love of horse racing before you went to university.
Oh,
so where did
that was
come from?
embedded. My father was brought up on Harry Rag, and when I came to Newmarket, it was I couldn't wait to meet Jeff Rag. Lovely man.
So your dad was a punter, was he?
He loved a bet. Yeah, well, when I was very young, times were hard. He was a miner, and I don't know if they'd been on strikes. I was too young to know then, but he was a very generous man, but he didn't have a lot of money, and at the time, he wanted to buy me a rocking horse. So he had his last thing, 10 bob, I think it was called then, on a horse called Oxor that won the national. So the rocking horse arrived, didn't it? And you can imagine what the rocking horse was called then, can't you? Oxor. So that was it. We used to go. He used to go and feed. Like there was a farm with a couple of horses in. We used to go walk. We used to walk miles around there, and I used to go feed the horses. So it was that, and then also the bookmakers. My grandmother, I was about 250 yards from the bookmaker shop, down the back of our colliery house, and Joe Schuster his name was, and I used to be bookies runner. I used to go. I was only 8 or 9, but I used to give them the slip. I hand them the slip and put my grandmother's bets on. So that was it. First race meeting I went to was Redcar for what's called the Vaux Gold Tankard. And that was it. So lifelong passion for the game.
So a career in something to do with horse racing was always on your mind.
Yeah.
And so where did it go from York University?
Well, I went to work for Timeform when I graduated. I was at Timeform. Very strange times for me, because at the time the salary was. It was the sort of salary you'd have to pay someone who had very wealthy parents. I think I started in 1970, end of 79. I started on £2,800. I was living in a dingy bed sit in Halifax when Jack the Ripper was about, and my mate took me down. I could never understand that. I never got interviewed, because when I had that hoax about the voice and everything, and they dropped me off, and I was living on near Savile Moor sort of thing. Never got interviewed. My mate who took me down, they tracked him down and interviewed him, But anyway, but it was like another apprenticeship, really. But I sort of I was getting overlooked for promote. I didn't really want to leave, to be honest, but at the time, but I kept getting overlooked for promotion. Some posh kid would come from Eton or somewhere. They'd get the writer's job, and I'd be still do. I was assistant at the handicapper then, which didn't sit nicely with me, because I always wanted to write, and so I went to work for Weatherby's in Wellingborough, which within 2 minutes I knew that I shouldn't have been there, because they were trying to quell my interest in horse racing. I thought, well, this ain't gonna work.
How do you mean trying to quell it?
Well, because it was more just an admin. I was editing the racing calendar, but it was an admin job, and I saw it as a vehicle to other things. But I had the editor of Rough's Guide used to ring me every week for lists of amateur riders, or lists of the up-to-date lists of the jockeys, etc., which went in Rough's Guide, and I just used to plague him every week. any jobs at the Sporting Life, any jobs at the Sporting Life, and then eventually I wore the buggers down, you know. And I went, luckily Neil Cook, who was the editor, was a great friend of Alastair Down, and Alastair Down had been at York, and so we knew each other, and obviously Alastair put a good word in for me, and I was there. I started on the same day at the Sporting Life weekend as Mike Cattermole, who's obviously a very famous commentator, and also that superstar commentator Simon Holt. He started a week before us, but like we were this sort of three. Well, it'd be nice to be in that bracket, but we were the three whiz kids, and the promotions they went to us if there was any. You know, we were pushed within the Sporting Life to do better.
Was the time at Timeform, did that make you into a good punter?
I remember the first time I ever came to Newmarket, because Phil Bull was still alive then, and I thought like doffing my cap to Phil Bull. I thought, God, he's made it. So I come down to Timeform with Reg Griffin and Jim McGrath and Phil. I think Phil Bull, he went in the same car, but I came down with them my first visit, and I just listened to Phil Bull. I thought, well, he knows a lot more than me. Did me month's wages in 3 days at the Craven meeting. Now that was a lesson learned. I thought, Christ, you know. But no, by and large, you did well, because you had the speed figures, you had the form, you know, and you watched the videos every day. So if you couldn't make a few quid out, you know, we were on such low wages, you couldn't make massive amounts of money, but it was a good grounding for anyone. Yeah, anyone. It was the best place to go for an apprenticeship if you were going to go further up the ladder, you know.